As part of the course, I will not credit the person who reconstructed all 5 of Arisandra Sue's incredibly inefficient 8.83 official average. The link to the reconstructions are definitely not in the video description, thanks. For the first solve, Arisandra had this blue and orange in the right face, this green on the front, and this red up here. He didn't even predict first pair or track first pair, which is extremely disappointing. So what he did was a wide L, F, and an R to insert these 2 cross edges, L, D, and then he had to kind of re-grip afterwards because he has to do a D move again after inserting this red edge. So that's incredibly disappointing. He could have done like a wide move or something of the like, but he didn't do that. So obviously he was needing to go into his first pair. There was this one here which he could have taken out and inserted, but he didn't do that, of course, because he's really bad. So what he actually did was get this blue and red corner piece and this red edge and red and blue edge here, and rotated, took them out, and then paired it up, and then inserted into the back. It's a good thing to remember to insert into the back. However, there was some opportunity to use this pair earlier, which wasn't utilized. He then had a similar, the same case again here. So he rotated, took the edge out, inserted into the back, and as you're going to see, these next 2 pairs will not orient any of the edges on top, so that'll kind of cause an issue for him later on in the solve. So what he does is he goes into this pair immediately. He could have rotated to have it like in the back, so he could have gone to the last pair easily, but he didn't, and he just did it in the front, so he just did a ton of inverse sexies and inserted it. Very luckily, he had this final pair set up, which I'm sure he did not track. So he just immediately saw it, went into it, and had no regard for EO for OLL. So he just rotated and inserted it, and now he panicked. So he did a Fruroff, and then he had this OLL, and then he had a Y-perm to just top it all off. Here on Arisandra's second solve, which was a 9.06, he had some opportunity for some pseudo-slotting and some multi-slotting opportunities, but he didn't take them, obviously. So what he had was this blue and this little block here, which he could have preserved, and he could have tracked this edge, but he didn't. What he went and did instead was kept the blue edge in the right, U prime, to bring this orange edge over, and then inserted it into the front. And then what he did was insert this green edge here, did a D move, and then inserted this last red edge into the right. This was quite inefficient. However, there was this very nice pseudo-slot opportunity here, but he does not take it, obviously, as we're about to see. He just instead goes for this pair and this corner, the red and blue pair, instead of perhaps using a pseudo-slot to insert this orange edge and solve this pair at the same time. So he just goes into this pair immediately, which is kind of bad, but that's alright. And then he rotates and then solves these 2, which was an unnecessary rotation. He could have just solved them here, but he didn't. He paired them up by rotating. And then he rotates again in order to insert it into the left, which was quite disappointing to see. What he does next is this pair into the front right, which is nicely paired up, but then he has to rotate to finish the last pair. And now he has to rotate over U2, and then he pairs them up, and then he has some pauses. Instead of just sledging it like this, he rotates, does some U moves, and sledges it into the back, which is probably due to nerves. So then he has this OLL, which is quite simple, which is nice, and then he has a T-perm. Again, that was a disappointing solve. There was a very obvious opportunity for a pseudo F to L pair that could have been used, but he just didn't take the opportunity, probably just due to competition nerves. This next solve is incredibly painful to watch the reconstruction of because there's just so many errors made in the cross. So what he has here is this green edge in the back here, this orange edge, and these two already attached to their centers. And what he does is notices that this pair will pair up, however, gets these two cross edges solved incorrectly, which he then has to fix. So it's kind of painful to watch. So what he does is a D prime, and then kind of hesitates and does a D prime again, and then L prime to pair this up. And these two you could have just gone into a D to fix them, but he doesn't. He does an F2 R to solve these, but notice how these two aren't solved yet. And then U2, and then he puts them in, and then realizes, oh no, they're not solved correctly. So then he rotates over U2, and then has to insert these two. And then, instead of just using an L2 to solve this, he rotates again and does an F2. Incredibly disappointing to see. So what he does next is, instead of doing this pair that's already in the top layer, he sees this pair immediately, which is in a slot, and he has to take it out and insert it, which is quite a time waste. He could have done this pair, inserted it to take it out, and it would have stayed together. So, but what he does is rotates, takes the pair out, does a wide D, and inserts it into the right. Now he has to rotate back over again. So he rotates over and does this pair instead of this pair, which is already in the top layer. Now by doing this pair, he inserts this into the front right slot, which kind of gives him a bad last slot case. So he pairs them, but this is inserted. And now he has this case. Then he has his OLL. And then he has another T-perm, which he got quite lucky with. So what Ari has here for his fourth solve of his average is this pair pre-made, this cross edge attached to its correct center, this and the orange and the green cross edges which can be inserted quite quickly, and this one. So this was quite an alright cross. And he did look ahead to this pair, which was quite nice. So he did a U prime, and then inserted these two cross edges, and then an L, had to regrip here, a D, an L2 to insert this red edge into the correct position according to the other cross edges, and then a D prime for his cross solution. So what he did here was he used this pre-made pair and then just rotated and inserted it. The pair that he immediately saw was this blue and red edge in the front right slot and this here. So what he would do is pair them up, rotate and insert into the back, which is nice because then you have two free front slots. This next pair was incredibly inefficient, and I'm quite disappointed to see this solution. What he does is, instead of just simply pairing it like this, which has a nice pair which you can insert, he changes the orientation of this corner and then has to pair it up again after this orientation, which is incredibly inefficient. There was a much simpler solution there. Finally, he had this pair, so he rotated and did a U2. Instead of just doing it like this, by just changing where the corner is, he decided to change where the edge is in comparison to the corner. So he did a U2 to pair it up, and then a rotation, and then insert into the back. He got quite lucky with his OLL, it's quite a quick and simple OLL, and then he had a G-perm, so that's his fourth solve of his average. For his fifth and final solve of his average, he has a pretty nice cross solution in just simply due to the fact that he preserves this pair. Other than that, it was just pretty mediocre. But since he had this first pair to go into, it was quite convenient. So what he did was a D prime, F2, R2 to solve these three edges, and then a D prime and an R prime to solve the last red cross edge. So then he, instead of doing something like a wide U prime, so then he can insert it into the back, he didn't, he just did a D prime. So He then rotated over to the U2 and inserted it into the front right, which is quite disappointing to see. You want to try to aim to solve into the back slots as a general rule of thumb. And then for his second pair, he rotated over and solved these two. So he pairs it up and then rotates and inserts it into the back, which is better. And then he has this pair, nice, where he goes into some lefty turning, which is quite interesting. And then he gets lucky with this last pair, which is made for him already. However, for his last pair, he does have a bit of hesitance and rotates and then sees it, oh, it's paired up, and then inserts it. Then he has quite a nice OLL. However, instead of just doing a U2 flick, he does a U prime, U, and then he inserts, and then he solves OLL, and then he has another G perm. So to conclude, fast averages usually are pretty bad. And also, Aris Sanderson is a bad Rubik solver. Do not take advice from him. Some other key takeaways. Planning the first pair is quite a useful skill to have, as then it reduces your pauses. And emulating comp nerves is something that he's been attempting to do after the competition, as he would like to get used to the competition environment, as he doesn't get to go to many competitions, simply due to the place where he lives. So, anyway, thanks for watching. Fake Laser Monkey, out.